Hello and welcome to today's broadcast. I'm going to listen to a couple of minutes of Attorney General Merrick Garland speak on the topic of Uvalde and Robb Elementary, the shooting in Texas, a shooting that was facilitated by the lax gun laws in Texas that are part and parcel of a general push to weaken public safety via falsely interpreting the Second Amendment to mean that it allows for all citizens to carry guns when it plainly and evidently is referring to a well-regulated militia, and bear arms being a military term in use around the time of the framing of the Constitution originally. So that willful misinterpretation of the Second Amendment has a high casualty rate associated with it, both in terms of the number of lives stolen from individuals, children, as well as adults, causing the leading cause of death for children and adolescents to now be gun violence deaths, overtaking even the high rate of vehicular deaths. So without further ado, let's listen to Merrick Garland on the topic of the investigation into the Uvalde shooting and more specifically the professional response to it.
But within minutes of arriving inside the school, officials on scene transitioned from treating the scene as an active shooter situation to treating the shooter as a barricaded subject. This was the most significant failure. That failure meant that law enforcement officials prioritized the protracted evacuation of students and teachers in other classrooms.
And there were children barricaded in with the shooter, and it just is a very harsh way to underline the truth that the presence of more guns doesn't equal the presence of greater safety. A lot of men with guns, and they still were so fearful of an armed gunman armed with an AR-15 assault weapon of some description, because those things do shoot bullets that tear your body apart, and particularly children. Doctors have spoken of grapefruit-sized holes in people's bodies, and these are weapons that were designed to not just take the life of a person, but to disable a soldier on a battlefield to the extent that then other soldiers will be pulled out of active combat in order to assist their wounded colleague and remove them from the battlefield. So these are very destructive, forceful bullets fired from assault weapons, and they don't have any place outside of a well-regulated militia. If you are part of a militia and you therefore have the authorization to carry a gun in war settings or in certain circumstances, law enforcement settings, then most people would support that. I imagine it would be close to consensus that everybody would support war weapons in the hands of combatants and law enforcement, although the militarization of the police force, when police sometimes don't receive adequate training in conflict de-escalation strategies, and don't receive adequate training in how to best protect and serve people rather than avoid the ego harm of feeling disobeyed, and will sometimes abuse weapons in high pressure situations. I'm thinking specifically of the team recently, the police team that swatted the wrong house and subjected a baby to flashbangs, which contributed to the hospitalization of that baby. Sorry, I'm going to go back to listening to Merrick Garland now.
Instead of immediately rescuing the victims trapped with the active shooter. It meant that officials spent time trying to negotiate with the subject instead of entering the room and confronting him. It meant that officials asked for and waited for additional responders and equipment instead of following generally accepted active shooter practice and moving toward the shooter with the resources they had. It meant waiting for a set of keys to open the classroom door, which the report concludes was likely unlocked anyway. And it meant
the door was unlocked. Oh, it hurt so much because I just recall listening to the 911 audio of the children who called 911 and were whispering and saying, "Please help, he's here." That there were injured children whose lives were ebbing away as the minutes passed. Ow, that hurts.
the victims remained trapped with the shooter for more than an hour
Ow.
after the first officers arrived on scene.
All right. So use the pain to buttress up a resolve to be vocal about the true meaning of the Second Amendment. I don't have any compulsion to show deference to the 2010 decision by the Supreme Court, led by corrupt conservative Supreme Court Justice Samuel, not Alito, Samuel, not, we have to Google it. Who decided that one? I mean, of course, the Supreme Court has also made more recent rulings on guns that have further weakened at a federal level the ability for states to regulate gun ownership, gun purchases, and gun sales. It's not Justice Alito. Oh, well. Yes, I can't talk for too much longer, maybe 10 more minutes, but I did want to highlight that the actual text of the Second Amendment is, the first phrase is a well-regulated militia. It's the opening clause of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the safety and security of a free state. That is the introductory phrase, and then further phrase highlighting the applicability of this amendment with regards to the establishment of a well-regulated militia in the United States, absent any kind of federal level budget to build an army, a national army, or even state level guards, to protect against incursions by potentially the British or the Spanish or the French, anybody that America was likely to be at war with in its early days. The Second Amendment codifies the right of those militias to bear arms in defense of the United States, in defense of a secure and free state. Now, ramping up the odds of civilian deaths and child deaths by loosening regulations around the ownership and sale and storage of guns is a recipe for further child casualties, which is exactly what we've seen in the United States and is a significant contributor to the disproportionately high homicide rate in the United States as relative to the homicide rate in peer nations, Australia, various European countries, etc. If you lower the bar for peer nations and you try to compare the United States homicide rate to more lawless countries, then yes, the homicide rate is lower than it is in Venezuela. Nevertheless, well-regulated nations that have a proper shared respect for civilian safety and civilian freedom to move about in the world without having to see people open carrying weapons, without seeing people trying to intimidate other people, without that the facilitation that gun proliferation provides to murdering people at the drop of a hat or the click of a safety switch. And that's something I encourage people to be vocal about and not apathetic, because those with a vested interest in profiting from gun proliferation and gun violence and the extra paranoia and fear that some people get and reflexively respond to high levels of gun violence with an increased desire to own more guns, because they know that there's a risk that a level will be reached of parents collectively unwilling to tolerate the risks to their children, and who might, in an appeal to rationality, advocate for more gun regulations, or that they might overcome the extreme gerrymandering in a lot of American states and be able to manifest enough votes for the one political party that's willing to take action on this front of increasing public safety by further regulating gun supply and gun usage, the Democrat Party, because there's a lot of propaganda to encourage people to vote Republican in order to protect their Second Amendment rights and their freedom. And what they're really doing is violating their own freedom to move about their lives and for their children to move about their daily lives with a sense of safety and security, and are increasing the likelihood that children in schools will be subject to these kind of homicidal attacks by people who aren't armed with knives, who aren't armed with sticks or stones. They're armed with weapons of slaughter, and they are encouraged to compete with each other, sociopaths online, to beat previously attained totals of civilian massacres and children massacred in these type of gun facilitated shootings. Yeah. All right, so we listened to Merrick Garland. We'll listen to somebody else next. Yes, your children are not safe in Texas. It's a good point. They will abandon your child, and the Governor Abbott could not care less. 300 officers failed to stop an 18-year-old with an AR-15 in Uvalde. And the Republican district attorney continues to prevent the release of critical body camera footage in an attempt to cover up the shit show that unfolded. Now, we've seen some of that footage. We've seen officers waiting in that corridor, and everything they did while they were waiting really underlines their reluctance to confront the gunman. An understandable reluctance, in that we know the damage to the human body that can occur from being wounded or being shot by a bullet fired from an AR-15, but that those grown men were leaving children to deal with their gunshot injuries from that same weapon without confronting the gunman, without following that protocol that you must confront an active shooter as soon as you arrive on scene, that they were disregarding the lives. They wrote those children off as already dead. They were disregarding the suffering of those children whose lives could potentially have been saved. They were disregarding the emotional suffering of the children who were those who were not wounded by the gunman's fire, and were watching their classmates bleed out by their sides and having to stifle their dying cries. So, yeah, if you think about that, and if it's sad, if it hurts, use that pain, and don't allow that pain to prompt you to retreat into passivity or some kind of demoralized apathy. Remember that there have been wars for hearts and minds that have been fought and won before. People didn't initially want to give civil rights to Black Americans. People didn't want to give the right to vote to women. People don't want to protect children in the case of noisy, loud, wrong people asserting that the supremacy and the primacy of their right to own whatever they want. They want to own a tank. Oh, well, apparently they think they should be allowed, and that the Constitution blesses them to own tanks, grenade launchers, whatever they want. There should be no, shall not be infringed. Their rights to own whatever weapons shall not be infringed upon. And it's constitutionally sanctified to ignore that it opens, the Second Amendment itself opens with the text, a well-regulated militia. They think they have the right to pretend they are in a well-regulated militia. That false belief has been supported by some Supreme Court decisions and continues to be supported by corrupt elements in the Supreme Court. People who take money to go on luxury hunting vacations. Clarence Thomas has taken money to go on multiple luxury vacations over the course of decades, accepted money to buy a luxury mobile home. What are they called? HVs? Mobile homes. Anyway, homes on wheels. And he lied and said to a documentary about him, Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, said that his favorite holiday is just in the parking garage area of a Walmart. But of course, he's got a luxury mobile home. He was loaned that money and then the loan was forgiven. So essentially, he's been gifted a whole bunch of things by bad faith actors who seek to profiteer off lax gun laws and who don't care about children being massacred in schools. And they don't care about the children who have access to guns from unsafe storage, who accidentally shoot their friends or their parents or their siblings or themselves in home circumstances either. They don't care about any of this. They don't care that America's homicide rate is relatively higher than other places. Now, I'm going to leave very shortly, but I'll just make some quick reference to the fact that Trump was in court today. Actually, was he in court today? He was nevertheless involved in a civil trial being held today to ascertain the amount of damages that should be paid to advice columnist E. Jean Carroll, who used to write for Vogue, I believe. Was it Elle? Regardless, she was an advice columnist. She was a celebrity in the 90s, a minor celebrity, and was flattered by Trump's attention, Trump then being a high-profile businessman, who asked her in Bloomingdale's, having met her on the steps, to accompany him and help him select a present for a female partner, who I believe was Marla Maples at that stage. And she accompanied him and she went to the change rooms with him, and he attacked her in those change rooms. He's been found liable for sexually assaulting E. Jean Carroll in the change rooms of an upmarket shop. Is it Bloomingdale's? Regardless, he's already been found liable for that assault and ordered to pay her $5 million. This is another trial in which he's being asked to pay damages for continuing to defame E. Jean Carroll, and his lawyer has been violating a lot of court procedures, a lot of evidentiary rules, and has been reprimanded multiple times by the judge. Trump yesterday was doing a lot of loud whispering to his counsel so that he could be heard by E. Jean Carroll during her testimony, saying that she was a liar, that she'd recovered her memory, calling the trial a farce and rigged, and doing a lot of things to try and interfere with the administration of justice in the United States. I'd just like to close by saying it's a central strategy of fascism to act in a way, if you're a cult leader of a fascistic political movement, to act with impunity as if you can break laws without consequence, that court rules and regulations don't apply to you. It's to empower your followers with a sense that anything is possible for them too. They don't have to be constrained by laws, rules, societal norms, decency standards, etc. You can be racist, you can be sexist, you can even be a rapist and found liable for it, and then continue to defame your accuser as a liar and and someone who's just doing it for attention. You can continue to violate norms and laws, and that is the promise of shared omnipotence that you invite your followers to attach themselves to, in the hope that it'll be so addictive that they'll continue to support you regardless of what evidence is produced that conclusively proves you're guilty of the most significant crimes, national betrayals of national interest, mismanage a pandemic on purpose, start a trade war to boost your image as a strongman, even when that trade war causes a manufacturing recession and an economic recession in 2019, even prior to COVID. You want to play smoke and mirrors and distract from all of those outcomes, whether they be from malfeasance or criminal activity, and then say, oh, but presidents have to have total immunity, as Trump said on his Truth Social account. Oh, I've got to go. Take care, everyone. Talk again soon. Don't forget to be active against fascism and stay smart and stay safe. Thanks. Bye.